Storytime on how I found out I was adopted. So growing up, I felt so different from my family, and the treatment was off as well. So my mom is white and my dad is black. And my brother and sisters are all biracial, and at the time I thought I was too. My older brother and sister were both light skinned, they had light eyes, they had curly or wavy hair, and same thing for my little sister. But she honestly looked like a white girl. I mean, if you would straighten her hair, you would have thought that she was just white. And she looked more like my mom than anything. But me on the other hand, I turned out completely different. I forgot to mention, but my dad is light-skinned as well. I was dark-skinned, I had the regular dark brown eyes, and my hair was extremely kinky, and I recently found out that I have 4B hair. And I never understood how I turned out this way, and the rest of my family was light-skinned. I don't know, I just sometimes felt like I didn't belong in the family, and I wasn't pretty enough. And I definitely sensed something was off because my grandmas and aunts and uncles treated me way different. And I could tell I wasn't their favorite. Sorry I went on a rant, but if you want to know how I found out, come back for part 2. This is part 2 on how I found out I was adopted. So, like I said earlier, I look completely different from my family. Mom's white, dad is black. Anyway, so the day I found out. So, one time in class, we were doing Punnett squares. And at the time, I was in 8th grade. We did Punnett squares with our parents, height, hair, skin, eyes, everything. But my Punnett squares weren't adding up. Like, I didn't get the traits that I'm supposed to have. So, that day after school, I showed my mom the Punnett squares. And my mom said that they weren't accurate and that the Punnett squares aren't a real thing. So I just went on with life again, just thinking that it was fake and that the Punnett square theory was wrong. Then a week later, I went back to school and showed my friends, and I told them, and they said that the Punnett squares were accurate. Then one of them laughed and said, "You must be adopted or something." And when she said that, literally my whole world clicked. Sorry, but it's literally so much to the story. You're going to have to come back for part 3 on how I even asked my parents how I was adopted or if I was adopted. So, sorry. This is part 3 on how I found out I was adopted. So one of my friends said that I must be adopted, and like for a whole month, it was just sitting on me to ask my parents if I was. I was kind of scared because I didn't want to believe that I was actually adopted, but everything was starting to add up from how I looked to how my family treated me, and it's always just been so weird. So one night we were having like a family movie night, and I started crying in the middle of the movie. My dad had paused the movie and asked what was wrong, and I finally asked what's been bothering me. Am I adopted? And my mom looked over to me, and from that look, I could just tell. A couple days later, my parents sat me down and talked about it, told me I was from Kenya, told me about my real mom, and just things that I wish I should have had known sooner. Because most of my life, I was questioning my existence. But now I'm 43 years old. I was able to find 2 sisters I had that were both older than me, and they were also adopted. But I never got to meet my real mom because she passed away before I could meet her. But I'm glad to have met the sisters that I have. When getting married, they say death do us part. It should be taken literally, but some of us don't take this statement serious enough because a Vietnamese man slept beside his dead wife for 16 years. In 2009, the shocking story of the man who dug up the remains of his late wife has been sleeping in the same bed with her for the past 5 years shook the internet. Many thought that the story was false, as his way of giving grief is quite unusual, but fast forward to 2020, and the man identified as Lee Van continues to sleep in the same bed with the wife's remains. It was said that before he decided to take her home, he dug a tunnel to her grave to sleep in the grave with her for 20 months. You'd think that by now the corpse body would look like dust and smell badly, but I'll get into how he reserved her body in the next part. Part 2 of the man that slept with his dead wife for 16 years. The 55-year-old man, Lee Van, is from a small town in Central Province in Quang Nam, opened up his wife's grave in 2004. He molded clay around the remains to give the figure of a woman, put clothes on her, and then placed her in his bed. He made it clear that he has no intentions to let go of his wife, who he married in 1975. It was reported that the duo's marriage was arranged by their parents, and at the time they married, they hardly knew each other, let alone shared a romantic feelings towards each other. They were married shortly after Lee Van got back from the military, but they soon fell in love and had 7 children. Van's wife is said to have suddenly died in 2003 upon hearing the news. Van rushed home and barely got to see his spouse's face for a few minutes before she was buried. The grieving husband was so shocked by his wife's death that he spent most of his time night and day at the cemetery. He slept on his wife's grave. But after a few months, he worried about the weather and wanted to keep the body safe with him. Part 3 of the man that slept beside his dead wife for 16 years. This man literally dug up his wife's corpse body and still to this day sleeps with it. His concerned children found out about his sleeping place and stopped him from sleeping his nights at the cemetery. It was at this point where he decided to bring his wife home with him. He could no longer sleep next to her in the cemetery. Unable to let go of his beloved, he dug up her bones and placed them in a bag near the cemetery. Then he started making a hollow statue in the shape of a woman out of plaster, cement, glue, and sand and put his wife's remains inside. He placed the hollow statue on his bed and laid next to it. And he's been doing the same thing every night for the last 16 years. If you guys want to see images of the wife's body, please let me know down below in the comments if you really want to see those images. Storytime on how I found out my dad was transgender. Also, by the way, at the time I was 12. So I grew up an only child. I always wanted siblings, but my parents said that I was enough. And we would never really go see family like my grandparents. When I was a toddler, I used to see them. Well, at least that's what my parents told me. But I was never close with any of my family besides my one aunt. So one day I had a sleepover and I invited my friend and we played hide and seek. And I spent like 10 minutes looking for her until I finally found her in my basement holding a book. I was like, girl, I'm done playing with you. And she said she found an old picture book. When she told me, I was kind of excited because I haven't seen much of my family. As we went through the book, I saw a picture of my grandparents and 2 little girls. One of the girls in the picture I knew was my aunt because the mole, but I didn't know who the other girl was. I flipped the picture around and it said familia, which by the way is family in Spanish. And I was like, so there's another aunt that I don't know about? But if you want to know how I confronted my dad about it, come back for part 2. This is part 2 on how I found out my dad was transgender. So, like I said, I found a picture of my dad's family, but he wasn't in it. That night, I went to my parents' bedroom and I saw my mom. I showed her the picture and she gasped. I asked, do I have another aunt and where's dad? She told me to sit down and that they wanted to tell her, but they wanted to wait at an age where they think I'd understand. So, a couple minutes later, my dad walked in and I asked, who's this girl? He said next to me, held my shoulders, and said that was him. And I started laughing at first because I was like, you're not a little girl. And he responded, at that time, that was me. And from there, he just told me everything. To when he finally transitioned, he talked about how unaccepting my grandparents were, which is partially why I really don't go see them. After everything my dad told me, I just sat there and cried for him. And my mom and dad both held me and told me everything was going to be fine. It's been 9 years and I have so much more respect for my dad, no matter what anyone thinks.
My ex and I started dating when we were freshmen in high school. After we graduated, we went to separate colleges, but that couldn't keep us apart. We were still crazy for each other, and after a few semesters of long distance, he transferred to my school and we finished our degrees together. He asked me to marry him shortly after graduation and I was ecstatic. A few months after our engagement, I found out that I was pregnant. We were over the moon and so excited for our first child. Unfortunately, I suffered a miscarriage and it sent us both into a deep spiral. I was disconnected and the lowest I've ever felt. It took a toll on our relationship and we decided to take a break. We both took time apart to heal, hoping maybe we'd come back to each other. My biological father got sick and needed help running his business, so I moved an hour away to help him. Throughout this time, my ex and I would check in with each other here and there. However, during our break, my stepsister was hanging out with him and there for him when he needed someone. I guess that support turned into something more because 6 months later, I found out she was seeing him. She never mentioned it or talked about it, and when I found out, my heart felt like it was in my throat. It turns out that my parents knew about it and never told me. I found out only when I was staying over at my mom's house one night and accidentally overheard a conversation between my parents mentioning that she was spending a lot of nights over at his place recently. When I confronted her, she said that it just happened and I can't be mad at her for it because I wasn't there for him. She then also stated that maybe everything that happened was for a reason, including me losing my baby because she's supposed to be the one who ends up with him. I cut her off and ignored her after this conversation. No matter how many times she texted and apologized for what she said, I couldn't forgive her. I couldn't bring myself to face him or confront him because I was so angry that he would choose my stepsister of all people he could be with. I also can't lie that I haven't gone over him and I still have feelings. 3 months later, I got a wedding invitation from her. Now they're getting married, my family is pushing me to reconcile with her and saying that I need to support them. The thought of seeing them together kills me and I don't think I could go through with it. Am I wrong for not wanting to be a part of their lives? I moved into my flat a couple years ago. My mom lives about 10 minutes away walking distance. At the time I lived alone, so I gave her my second key. That way if I ever lost my key, I could just go to her place and grab it, or if there was ever an emergency, then she could help me. My partner of 3 years moved in with me about a year ago. I asked my mom for her key so I could give it to him, but she kept forgetting it, so I just made a copy of mine. My mom has kept her key, and though she swears she doesn't use it, I'll get home occasionally to find something is different, and my mom admits to causing it. My partner and I also have a baby, a 6-month-old. I'm currently able to be at home with him, but sometimes when I need to go out, my mom comes over to babysit. It was my birthday a few days ago, and my mom decided to let herself in. She planned to enter our bedroom and wake me up with a surprise, her presence in my flat and a card. Unfortunately, she got the surprise, catching me and my partner while we were busy. My mom left the room and let's just say it ruined the mood, and her joking after to break the tension did not work as she hoped. Obviously, everyone is embarrassed about this, and on the basis of not wanting it to happen again, I asked her for her key back. I told her the next time she wanted to come over just to call or text me and I would let her in. She refused to give the key back, calling me short-sighted, selfish, and ungrateful. She also said I'm prioritizing my relationship with my partner over my relationship with her. I said she's acting like a jealous ex and is creepy. She needs to calm down and leave the key. She then took the key and stormed out, so I asked my partner to change the main lock. My mom tried to get in yesterday to talk to me and make up after our argument, but when her key wouldn't work, she called me and asked for shutting her out and not having a conversation with her. She said that me changing the lock made her feel like I didn't trust her. Am I wrong for changing the locks?